This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Good morning, Calvary. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Everybody say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it.
Good morning. Welcome to West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. Good morning, everybody online. We are so delighted you have joined us this Sunday morning. We were just recently talking about the rain that we had this last week and how beautiful it actually smelled. You know, I just love that smell, that desert rain. It just smelled so wonderful. So just another thing to be happy and joyful about. And one other thing I want to bring up really quick is that as we move into these holidays, I watched on the news this morning, they were celebrating Hanukkah and lighting, I think it's the 4th candle that they were lighting. And it was just interesting that how everybody is doing it differently. And so, but there's still a lot of love and a lot of joy and a lot of celebration going on. It just looks different. And so I hope that all of us are doing our part in celebrating these holidays in our own new way and just enjoying them as we can. So speaking of enjoying a new way, so we have our wonderful guest singers here again today, Greg and John, and they actually have a special song for Reverend Karen. So we're going to get this next started.
Do it now?
Yeah, why not?
Perfect.
Hi. I bet you know that Reverend Karen loves cats. Something tells me that she's talked about that before. So, I thought John and I would sing for a Christmas gift from the band to her a song about cats.
Nice.
Yeah. I guess you could call it a religious song. It's about getting along. So let's see how it goes. I'm a cool cat, Sphinx cat, Lynx cat, Minx cat, Hep cat from North Plateau. I'm a Russian little bear cat, copycat, a rat-a-tat, a bundle of fur, you know. I can do lots of things like you've never seen. I can make you laugh till I've made you scream. I'm a fat, and all that top cat, fur machine. I'm a fur machine. I'm a tomcat, don't scat, tit for tat, a love that is more than you'll ever know. With my bad hat, I stand pat, get my nails shine at the kind of cat that's apropos. So won't you pour me some cream, feed me some kibble? I purr real pretty, honey, let's not quibble. I'm a fat, and all that tomcat, fur machine. Well, I go with the flow, and I'm gonna bestow some of my cat tips to you. I reap what I sow, I let go, quid pro quo. That's the view I do pursue. Don't boo, I done boo, don't shampoo, that's taboo. This old snooze about it, who? Let's go to Catman. Wahoo! Take your bobcat, your girl cat, your short cat, your wire cat, your Burmese cat, and give them a hug. Your Devon Rex, your Cornish cat, your Shouter cat, your Mao cat, your ragamuffin cat, you name it, your dog. It's the best darn thing you can ever do. Give the kitty cat some love, give it back to you. I test to this bird, it's related to kitty cat love. So I go with the flow, and I'm gonna bestow some of my cat tips to you. I reap what I sow, I let go, quid pro quo. That's the view I do pursue. Don't shampoo, that's taboo. This whole slew's a ballet-oo. Let's go to Catman. So take your Scottish fold, Savannah cat, your Selkirk cat, your Munchkin cat, your Forest cat, and give them a kiss. your Arctic cat, your Pangora cat, your snowshoe cat, your putty cat, and half domestic feline whisk. It's the best darn thing you can ever do. Give your kitty cat some loving and give it back to you. I attest to this purview, it's really kitty cat love. Said it's the best darn thing you can ever do. Give your kitty cat some loving and give it back to you. I attest to this purview, it's really kitty cat love. Kitty cat love. Kitty cat love. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, John. Great job, guys. And before I forget, I want to thank the people that came in to help decorate the center and get this in the festive mode. So we've got the Christmas trees up, and we are ready to celebrate the holidays. So thank you for coming in and helping us do that. So now is the time to allow ourselves to get centered into this quiet place and knowing that our hearts and minds are open for Reverend Karen's message and the invocation.
I will make a quiet place within my heart, and I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord. I will make a quiet place within my mind, and I will wait upon the Lord. A quiet place within my mind, and I will wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord. Be still, my soul, be still. Be still, my soul, be still. Be still and know. I will make a quiet place within my life. Make a quiet place within my life, and I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord. I will make a quiet place within my heart, and I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord.
Good morning. So as I take that breath and reside in that quiet place, in this hour, at this time, I call upon the power and presence of God. That beautiful energy swirling within me, and without and all around me, and to everyone in this room. And I know these qualities of God are mine as well, because I am peace, I am joy, I am love. And I just allow that to be. And so I speak this beautiful word for Reverend Karen, knowing that her words and her wisdom will lift us into that higher plane of consciousness. I know this service will unfold exactly as it is supposed to. And that people in this room, in this beloved sanctuary, will feel that peace and that joy. And feel how very loved and special we all are as I am, as you are. So again, I take that breath and allow myself to feel the Spirit of God. I allow myself to be loved. And so with deep gratitude in my heart, I just release this prayer into the universe, knowing it is done and it is blessed. Blessed be, and so it is. And today my reading is from Sarah Blondin. It's called Heart-Minded. So sometimes the shadow of the mind is governed by fear, constriction, and shadow. And the body of light, by contrast, is governed by love, light, and kindness. It is the part of you still intact, connected to and aligned with the divine source within you. It has complete trust in life, no matter its experience. It is your lightness, the without walls, fluid, unstoried self, rich in beauty and rooted in devotion to the heart. Do not forget, you are built of truth. Be wise when inhabiting the spell of darkness. It can and will serve as the portal into your lightness. It is your guide back to wholeness, and it can teach you how to remove the divide between the two selves. When you find yourself in the shadow of the mind, ask for the truth to be revealed. Give it love. Love is its weakness. Remember this, you are made of truth. The rest is but an obscurity of your light. Please remember, you are the light.
Hi, again.
Hi.
So when I saw the topic for the message today about physics and quantum physics, I said, I've got the perfect song for that. And it's called How I Interpret the Exponential Difference Between the Physicality of the Known Universe and Quantum Mechanics Wonders of the World. Ready? Okay, good. I've traveled through the world, never known where I'm bound. And the circle that's my life, well, it circulates around. How I navigate that circle with no beginning and no end, I ponder. Am I part of something greater than my mind can comprehend? Things are not even close to what they seem. I'm co-creating in my dreams. I'm interplanetary dust. Oh no, my ego must have just conceived those glowing particles of me, expressing subatomically a manifestation supreme, all answers flowing out through me. I'm so glad you're here beside me on this journey through my life. It makes it infinitely easier and cuts down on all the strife to know we're all together at a level we can't see. Instead of singing to myself, I sing in harmony. It worked. Wow. I love my beaten pages of a book. Got stuff stuffed into every nook. It fits my fine philosophy. You see, we're fundamentally the same. All pieces of a grand chess game. All things are aligned so perfectly. Wonder and in quantum science of my life. It imbibed a self-reliance that provides a spiritual hug. And though I never know to where my mind will roam, well, the flowing's in the knowing that I've never left my home, 'cause I'm home with earnest home. I'm home, sweet home. I'm home. Thank you.
We love Craig Haley. Oh my goodness, we love you, Mr. Craig Haley. And John, did you know you were sitting right in the spotlight? From where I was, it was like the star, with a baby Jesus star was shining on you. I just think that was really quite exciting. Good morning. Good morning. You moved around, good choice. Get a little close, get out of the dark, you know. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about getting out of the dark, or being in the dark for a little while. Miss Jane, perfect reading to go along with what I have to say. And sorry, Craig, I took out all the quantum physics in the talk because that's my weakest topic. Those words are too hard to say, even that long. Wasn't a great song. You are way too fun. So I did create a message for us this morning. The title of my message is Facts and Faith, and it's taken from a quote from Dr. Holmes that is indeed his version of the physics side of spirituality, that now we have this wonderful realm called quantum physics or quantum mechanics that validates everything that some of us have been saying for a long, long time, and that feels really good. But I chose the topic because I wanted to talk about facts and faith in the way that they relate to the story of Christmas, and the season that we're in, and everything that happens next. And so there's something very important that I want to deliver in the message, and it is kind of a scientific-y sort of presentation. Some of it's a little heady, and then, you know me, I'll water it down so that I can understand it, and those of you who are, you know, standing equal height to my understanding of all the science stuff, we'll get it together the same way. So we are actually living in a time where I have been thinking a lot about this. I think the Christmas story may be more important this year than ever before. That whole way that, and I'll talk about this in greater detail, but the whole way that there's so much focus on the light, when in the northern hemisphere, we're really living in these dark, the nights are long. You know, here in Arizona, because we don't change the time, you know, it's 7:30 and the sun is just starting to bring daylight into our lives. That's a lot of darkness. I have a girlfriend that told me she put Christmas lights on the inside of the bushes so she could see the reflection of the Christmas lights in the house instead of out on the street. And I just think that's such a good idea. I really like that idea. So what I'm inviting us to do this year is to look at the way that in every story, including the Christmas story, there's legend and there's myth, and there's ways in which stories are passed down. So things that happen that are at one time actually facts become repeated stories, and those stories, because they're passed down person to person, change with our own interpretation of them. So I would remind you that in New Thought and even in a more secular way, with the studies they're doing on all the understanding the workings of the brain now, this whole field of neuroplasticity, what we say is that what you see depends a lot on what you're looking for. And I would say that we repeat our stories in a similar way, in whatever it is that we are, what's going on that's important in our lives. And so there's, I think, just this way that we are invited to now look at all these seasonal stories and celebrations and rituals,
and apply them to our life in a season of COVID, where we're sitting with a limited small group of people in a sanctuary that was designed to be filled at this time of year with people desiring to celebrate spiritual truth together. And we're doing it in a new way. And in fact, look at all of you at home. It's so wonderful to have you joining us and being a part of this new way that we're doing things. So the quotation from my favorite, the most amazing, in my opinion, the most amazing metaphysician of all is Dr. Ernest Holmes. And from his book, A New Design for Living, I found this quotation. And I've shortened it from the one that you apparently read. I took out the physics and all that stuff because that's just way too hard for me. Fact and faith need never collide. Fact and faith need never collide when they appear to either the faith has been misplaced or the fact has been misinterpreted. Now, that's really useful for us to reconsider in a time of a season of change, unlike anything any of us living at this time have ever experienced. Look, the sirens are sounding in celebration of this big change that sounds rather emergent, and we emerge and see. Right? So we're blessing whatever's going on in the world that calls them to run their fire engines, their sirens. But what happens in the world when we misplace our faith, I think, is that sometimes we just get busy in our living, or something frightens us, and we lose our sense of spiritual grounding for a little while. And that's all that misplaced faith is. And the problem with misplaced faith is that when we go to reinterpret what we think's going on anywhere in life or the world, we aren't making that interpretation from that divine way of seeing and experiencing life. We miss I would say in the sweetest way, we just miss the miracles. When we set down our faith and forget for a minute and we get tangled up in something, we start missing the miracles that are right in front of us. I have a really good friend back home, Bridget, who was my best volunteer. I was in charge on, boy, something's going on in the community. Let's just send big blessings out. My friend Bridget used to be my volunteer on Wednesdays, and I was the person for many years that made the programs for the Sunday service. And Bridget was, as soon as I would get done typing them and printing them, Bridget would take them over to her desk, which was right next to mine. She loved to work really close to me. And she would fold them. And every single Wednesday, when she was folding the program, the Sunday program, she would say, look at this gift of touch that God gave us. What a miracle that I can pick up these pages and separate them and fold them and crease them. What a beautiful gift. And it always reminded me to be grateful for the simple things, to just stand in that beautiful truth of recognizing that way we are indeed quantum physically connected in a way beyond what we can interpret, some of us. So we have been thrown this year into this place of stunning implications for major change in our lives. And I think that this quote from Holmes that says fact and faith don't have to bump into each other. Fact and faith can coincide at the same time. And I was thinking about what a merciful, beautiful gift of wisdom that statement alone could be for us at this time. Because I think that the fact is, the virus is a fact. It just is. And we have been asked to reconsider everything about the way we live our lives. And so in some strange way, I have come to be thinking that this particular situation gives us a renewed awareness that having a healthy respect for how we live our lives in a pandemic does not contradict our faith. So when we people who are passionately connected to a vibrant faith such as ours, where we really understand the mechanics of mental healing, that it is not, we have not done something wrong if we get sick. And in the early days of all this metaphysical healing stuff, you know, in all of New Thought, that when people got sick, they were shameful that they had gotten sick, and they would hide away and not tell anybody. And I love that we now have this opportunity to see that facts can rest with faith and they do not contradict each other. It's just, there's just wisdom in the universe, and that we all also have our own internal wisdom, and I always see it as that spiral. It's spiraling from the inside outward, so that we live our lives now. If we're living our lives consciously, we're not feeling like it's spiraling toward us, like it's out to get us. So the spiritual things that we talk about every Sunday and in every gathering and all of our discussion groups and the books that we read are all about empowering us and wisening us, so that we don't use that, what I call that spiritual malpractice, and think that we've done something wrong should we come into contact with the virus. There continues to be a lot of shaming around the virus that I just noticed. It's so prevalent on Facebook, and I really know that good, kind, loving people are involved in it without realizing the way that we cannot keep blaming and shaming. So this gorgeous season of Christmas that is about the birth of a brand new possibility being born on the earth is more important than ever before. And that's what I want to make sure that we have a good conversation today about just that. So Holmes is telling us, if it feels like you are having any kind of crisis of faith in your own life, maybe you're just misinterpreting what's going on, which is easy to do. It's really easy to be scared lately, right? So you're just misinterpreting what's in front of you, or for a moment, you have misplaced your faith. Now, I don't know about you, but I would just love agreement here somewhere as I wrap myself out on a personal thing that happens to me almost every morning. But I misplace my coffee. I get in my chair, I make my coffee and I get in my chair and I plan to be in my chair all morning. And then suddenly I'll be at that place where I want to journal, and doggone it, I've carried my journal into the other room. So I get up to go, and you know what happens. While you're up, you get sidetracked, and then I remember a book I wanted to look for. And if you've ever been to my house, you know I have a book or two. And then I kind of forgot what I was doing, and then I get myself back to my chair, and lo and behold, at some point I realize I have misplaced my coffee, and some days I misplace it so well that it's not worth hunting anymore, and I just go make a new cup of coffee. Right? So we understand that when we're talking about misplacing your faith, it's as simple as just getting up and setting your cup down somewhere, and then you don't notice till later that you've lost it, right? And then what do? Then you figure out how to remedy the situation, and sometimes it's making a fresh cup of coffee, and sometimes then the hunt is on, you know, and it's amazing where I find I have set my coffee some days. Absolutely amazing. But I want to say that the beautiful part of this, and this is why I liked your reading so much, this and more, but that we you know that word I'm trying to think of. We are hunkering down in this spiritual philosophy that gives us this idea, permission. In fact, Dr. Holmes actually recommends that we look at the discordance in your life, to acknowledge it. Don't pretend it's not there, but acknowledge it, so that you will then find that cup of coffee or find that misplaced faith, so you can get back on course and accomplish those things that you desire to accomplish. So our teaching is so wonderful in that it calls us to, you acknowledge the fact, you acknowledge the fact. That's just a thing in our life going on. It'll pass, it'll change, there'll be a different fact coming up pretty soon. And then it opens us to that intention, that way of being intentional about guidance. It opens us to the guidance. It calls us to a deeper clarity and a higher way to interpret everything that's going on in our lives. And this is no different. So as I look at the people I love and the people here in the community and the people that I talk to, I love that I have witnessed the way we do know how to stand in that spiritual substance. But I want to remind you that you created that substance in your own life, because there's that cumulative law of growth and change. We have a dedicated spiritual practice. You have a spiritual practice based on unchanging spiritual principles. And when you build on that day after day after day, there's a cumulative change in consciousness, and you can never go back. You can misplace what you had for a minute and forget, but it will always be there. You can always go back and call on it again. And so it's lovely that we dedicate ourselves to a path, to a spiritual path. So I want to talk a minute about the Christmas story itself. In the West, in the Christian view of the story itself, a Savior is born in earth. A Savior, a tiny baby, is born with this divine inheritance, is born in these humble surroundings, and a star comes in the sky, and it represents this light of hope, that there now is a light in the darkness, and it's a promise of hope for a new order, a new coming order. So in the Christian story, and this story is biblical, though the interesting part of the all of that I just referenced is that we have made it a huge story. And in the Bible, it's a very small writing. There's a tiny piece of it here and a tiny piece of it in another. And just in those 4 gospel books, there's the tiniest little piece. But we have put it all together and made a big old story about it. And we sing Christmas carols, and there's poetry. And then people have created a way to culturize the season so that it works for whatever culture you're living in. And so I would bring to mind something I said at the top of the message, and that is that as the facts of the story, that we believe there were facts in the beginning of the story, but the facts were told and retold, and they were put in poetry, they were put in songs so that people could remember them and share them with each other. And then finally, at some point, they were written down. The scribes, the religious scribes, would then capture the story in writing. But notice that every person that handled a piece of the story has put in, I love that word. It's so fun when you catch yourself saying putin. Every person that captured a piece of it, of preserving it, has now put in their own reflection and their own interpretation on it. And that's why even in the gospel books, the accounts are contradictory in some of the tiny details. You know, we see things like, were there shepherds? Or were there kings? You know, come on, what's going on here? Would it have been December? You know, so we have, if you want the facts, you might start seeing a lot of contradictions, and then you would miss the beauty of the point of the story. There is a reason more than 2,000 years later that story exists. So yeah, somebody wrote it down, and then 100 years later, a bunch of men got together and decided what did God ordain, how much of it is the Word of God, and then people told us what was, and then for a while we believed it. A lot of faiths believe it's inerrant. It happened exactly like that, and then other people disputed. And meanwhile, we start making Christmas trees and exchanging gifts and putting a different flair on it, depending on your culture, your religion, your family traditions. All of it plays a piece in how things get passed down. So if we look at the global view of celebrations at this time of year, what we see is there's a unified theme of light, right? So we have Christmas time and we decorate our homes with lights and we bring Christmas light. Thank God we don't put candles on a dead tree inside our house anymore. That couldn't have gone well. Moving on quickly, so pop balloons are going crazy in my mind. We have Christmas time, and we fill that as a season of light, but we also have Hanukkah from a completely different tradition, as Reverend Clyde mentioned earlier. We have in the Hindu faith, this is the time of year where they have this celebration, the Festival of Lights, and in a more secular, though still spiritual way, if we look at the earth-based spirituality, we celebrate this winter solstice. And it's really important for us because everybody in the northern hemisphere is suffering from light deprivation right now. Some regions more than others. I know I get a little cranky. I miss the sunshine. I don't try and deny that. But I recognize also that it is a part of the cycle of my life, noticing that I'm a little more blue around this season, and when it's cold, I'm not as happy, I'm not as frisky and energetic, and that I have my own cycle in my living, as we see the cycle in all of life. So there's this unique theme of creation and rebirth and hope in the dark night, and it shows up in lots of different ways for all the different cultures. But I wanted to also read to you something that Dr. Holmes wrote in the Science of Mind magazine many decades ago on his interpretation of the Christmas story. And one year, a long time ago, I was here. I typed it all out from that magazine. I don't even remember how I got it, but I typed it all out and I gave it as a handout, but we're not doing handouts right now. So I've selected one paragraph that I wanted to read to you that's rather beautiful. The heavenly voice that came to the shepherds of old who watched their flocks by the night, and that burst of glorious light accompanying this divine event should become more real to us in this season, in Christmas time. For we too are shepherds watching our flocks, and these flocks are our thoughts and our ideas and our fears and our faith. We too need divine guidance to lead us. And I have added the word now. We too need this guidance in our life right now more than ever before. So there's this beautiful annual recognition of a divine event, this burst of glorious light. I love it when Holmes is poetic. He's got something wonderful. Because we're shepherds, and our job is to shepherd the movement of thinking in our own minds. We are to look at our ideas and our beliefs, but I love this when he threw this statement and he said, shepherd your fears and your faith. So what a gorgeous way to just acknowledge that it's okay that we get frightened sometimes, and we often are frightened in the dark. That's, that we know that. So I see this as some great advice for the way we can move through this season. I have personally been feeling not the same as Reverend Clyde. I love your joy, Reverend Clyde. I love that you Well, here's the conversation that Reverend Clyde and I had. I'm feeling a lot of reverence. And I said to Reverend Clyde in a private meeting, I probably shouldn't confess this. But I love, yeah, right, I'm committed now. But, I love to tell the truth, so here goes. But I said to Clyde, do you think it's appropriate for us to decorate this year? I mean, that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like there's such reverence in this season where we need to so follow that advice of opening to that guidance. Is this appropriate? And he said, oh yes, oh definitely. We need that. We need the Christmas decorations and the joy and the festivity of it more than we've needed it before. And so then I realized he was absolutely right. He's always right. I don't know why that is. Sometimes I should be right. It is a time where I have been looking this week at that very question, what is it that makes this story so much more important this year, and why has it lasted so long, and how is it that it has now, it seems from my view, because I've been a New Thought minister for so many years now that I don't remember thinking differently than I do now, but right now I'm completely convinced this is a universal story with a message for each of us, and that we really want to be open, maybe even a little bit hungry for the return of the light and the birth of the holy newness that brings great possibilities for this new year that we are about to step into. We need it more than I've ever felt before. So as we look at this idea of story and myth and sort of the universal nature of all legends, of all mythology, there's always a theme. In recent decades, we have, I think it was Joseph Campbell that coined the term the hero's journey. We look at those patterns that are repeating. So it's a formula. It's order, disorder, and then reorder, and it seems to be the framework of just about every story. And it's well mapped out in that gorgeous way we look at the hero's journey. So here's what it looks like from that Joseph Campbell perspective of the hero's journey. In other words, we're all heroes. It's not that you've done anything heroic. It's the opposite of that. It's that you are living your life. You are living your life in this normal way, and you're quite comfortable with the normalcy of it. And then something disrupts the norm. It happens in every story. There's a fall, there's an experience of sinfulness or bad behavior, or you make a choice that just changes your life, or something happens in your life so that it feels like a storm moves through. Or sometimes you could say a storm literally moves through. So there are hurricanes and fires and things of every sort. So all of that is included in this natural formula of order, disorder, and then reorder, because that is the movement of life. It has to be in every story because it's the way it moves through life. So there's chaos. So you're living a normal life, something disrupts it, there's chaos, and there has to be this appearance or the actual experience of a loss that is equivalent to a death. It's a death kind of loss. Every part of change has that let go, and then the loss then is sort of the rebirth, and then we reestablish a different norm. So the hero leaves home, goes on this journey, because it's always, everything, every experience is that internal journey that we go on, that symbolic ways in which we are doing that same path. You come up against the obstacles. Sometimes you have to fight your way through. There's a point where there's death, and sometimes the letting go is just the place for birth, and sometimes it's an almost death that takes you then into something else, and you make your way home, and there are people around the way that challenge you, and there are people around the way that help you. Always in our life, you have all of those components, and then you go home again, and you begin to create a new normal. And for those of us who have lived more than a few years, we begin to recognize, and you never stay there. it continues and continues. It's a repetitive formula of life, and that's why it's something in us recognizes that in story. So I found this fabulous new book by one of my new favorite people, Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan priest. And it's actually a re-release of a book, but the title of the book is Order, Disorder, and Reorder, and he calls it The Wisdom Pattern. Actually, that's probably the name of the book, The Wisdom Pattern. The wisdom pattern is that which I just explained to you in the step-by-step movement of it. And he dedicates like 3 pages of nothing but examples of the way these patterns have shown up in life, and we can see it and we can relate to it. So he starts with the indigenous tribes, right? He talks about the nation's first peoples, and he says that, they had this great understanding of the changing of the seasons because it mattered for them to stay alive. They had to know when to plant. They had to see that it would thrive. They had to know when to harvest, and they had to allow that which decayed become the fodder for the next crop. Right, so there's that great in the native tribal traditions. We have this understanding that day leads to night, and night gives birth to morning. It's the same pattern. It repeats and repeats. So we see it in indigenous tribes. We see it in religion, birth and sin and rebirth. We see it in the Christian religion as birth and the life of Jesus, right? Birth in the manger, crucifixion, resurrection, and we see it in philosophy. We see it in science. Oh, he had one for quantum physics that was really quite intricate. We see it in sociology. We see it in, he even listed the 12-step programs as a perfect example of the way this story repeats. He said for 12-step, it's innocence, addiction, and recovery. And that if you see the cycle in it, you understand the sense of staying committed to something that is helping you live your life in a more whole and physically strong way. So then we take that all, so you get it, it's just big. It's everywhere present, not just at Christmas time. But if we apply that same formula to what we see in history, the historical movement of time and peoples, it will help us to understand where we are as we are right on the brink of change in which we do not know what 2021 will look like. But we are ready. Are we not ready to say goodbye to 2020? Yes, we are. And to rejoice and appreciate that we're continually moving forward, even though we don't have an exact time frame. So the people in the know tell us that currently we are living in what they would call a postmodern time, and this is the era that is trying to die out. This is the loss, the death, the imminent death. And that we are looking for something new to emerge, and we don't know what that is yet, but we're all moving. We're doing a damn good job. I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you for, taking your own interpretation, right? Let's give us a big hand. Let's just applaud ourselves for oh God, we've done good. And so we're living in this postmodern time. It's about to change, but before it was the postmodern time, it was the modern time. Modernism was born in the late 1800s, they say, and it brought a big change. Remember, it was all that Victorian stuff, and now all of a sudden the modernism shows up and everything changes. Architecture, the literature, more female writers began to start using their real names and not pretend they were men. All the arts, music, everything now takes a change with every big historical era that has an end and a beginning. And the modernism period lasted from the end of the 1800s up till about 1960. That makes me laugh. I was in high school. Well, I was almost in high school in 1960. But in the 1960s, oh my word, I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for my parents when I would bring home those long-haired boys that I was dating, and they didn't understand, and then the music that, they weren't fond of Jim Morrison like I was. They didn't get it. The Cream, they didn't like any of that a lot. You can see that there was this big upheaval in the 60s, and for the first time there was this lack of a confusion around patriotism and stuff, so that we had the whole Vietnam War thing, and people were going wild, and it gave, all of that change, feminism, all of that gave birth to postmodernism, and then, and then here we are. But the thing is this, what modernism had that had appeal to people, and this is important, modernism happened because of the gift of science and the way we had learned scientific laws, natural laws in the universe, and we began to use them. And so it was an age of reason. And in fact, they called modernism the age of enlightenment. So we had all this information and we liked it. It was great to feel certain about things. But guess what? Think about it. The 60s come, and we are not so certain anymore about life and about the future and things. There is this huge upheaval. So I just think it's interesting that in the Eastern religious theories and philosophies, spiritual beliefs, they're a lot more comfortable with the dark. That's why I really loved your reading. Not only was it timely for where we are on the calendar, but they're a lot more comfortable with life, and therefore they're a lot more comfortable with death. They have that at their root, that theory of the yin yang, the dark and the light, and it's a wheel and it turns, and they don't do aging with dread like we often do. I wouldn't say we dread it, though. Everybody I know does aging pretty darn well. I like being a religious scientist. We take pride in our aging. We do it well. So at some point, the age of reason begins to slip away, and we see now that all of that precise thinking that there's one way or another way doesn't work in a world that is trying to become more inclusive. So more and more people are waking up, and you know what they call the people that are waking up? And they've done this for generations, but we're cultural creatives. I love that, because Ernest Holmes always said, be open at the top, be open at the top. Craig probably wrote a song about it. He's probably trying to think of the words to it right now. Open at the top, and that's what the cultural creatives have always been good at. So the cultural creatives are the people that are less afraid of change. They're the ones that are the first one to go out and buy a VCR when VCRs came out. And then when VHS started to fade away, they were not afraid to step up and get DVDs and a DVD player, and they advanced. So they're the first people to jump in and take the risks and do those things. And then the rest of us follow, and then always on the other end there are those dragging their feet like, I am never going to give up my cassette player. Right? I still have a cassette player because you know what? I have a lot of cassettes. Every now and then, I think I might want to listen to some of those old tapes, but I never do. But nonetheless, I have not yet been willing to give them up. So facts and faith collide sometimes, historically speaking, and that's what brings us to change. And I want to say that some of the things I've worried about for years, like people not wanting to attend church and church attendance dying off and churches closing their doors, all of that now makes more sense to us, because we have been forced to learn to do church in a more universal way, in a bigger way, and we can reach a lot more people. But what we're doing is we are a part of living and revealing the wholeness of life. And so much as in the East, where they have been more comfortable with the dark and the light, we are finding our balance and our equilibrium in it here, even in the Western world. And we are standing firm in this idea. We have been teaching as part of New Thought. We teach oneness. I think it's one of the hardest things to teach. I often say, I'm not really sure I can get you there. And you kind of have to have an experience of it. It's that thing, but that's where we're headed, because we can no longer pretend we're not all connected in the way that we are. So we are evolving or emerging toward this idea of wholeness at Christmas time as we wrap up the end of a trying year. And I would remind you that there's an essence of this that is completely natural, and particularly when we speak of it as the experience of metamorphosis. The way in which what is death for the caterpillar becomes birth and freedom and new life for the gracefulness and the beauty of a butterfly. I found this quote taken from the Kabbalah, from Jewish mysticism, and it's kind of a heading. This would be my quantum physics. This is the best I can do because I can read it. From the Kabbalah. Every phase of evolution commences by being in a state of unstable force. I used this quote a few months ago in another context, but evolution, the natural evolution of life on this planet, not just humans and not humankind, but like life, all of life, it comes, it's like birthed out of these unstable forces, the complexity that will no longer support the system the way it used to. And then it proceeds through organization to equilibrium. It organizes itself. Quantum physics explains it really well, right, Craig? And so then there's organization, there's a new balance, and then equilibrium having been achieved, the hero goes home, normal, things look normal again. No further development is possible until once more oversetting the stability and passing through a phase of contending forces. Right? And so that's life. Look at the story of the planet. Just look at the stories of the geology, of the formation of the planet, and then look at the way humankind has advanced through the years that we have done incredible things. So it's a hero's journey, and what I would say is, yes, there's turmoil in life. Yes, there's confusion and chaos in life, and in those times, it's important for us to keep our attention on unchanging principles. So I'm going to sum it up with a quote from the Richard Rohr book on the wisdom pattern. Here's the easy understanding of what I just read from the Kabbalah. A universal pattern can be found in all societies, in fact, in all of creation. Gosh, that's what I was trying to say today. Well done. We see it in the seasons of the year. We see it in the stories of Scripture, the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus, the rise and the fall of civilizations, and we see it even in our own lives. It's a universal pattern, and it's a great thing because it shows us, again, the continuity, the continuous nature, the ongoingness of life itself. So I want you to be open to the Christmas lesson for your life, whatever that is, in whatever way you celebrate or have rituals or festivities in your own families. Catch the lessons and do it with reverence. Not just in the same old way that at the end of the year you look back. I always journal and I look at the ways I've grown and changed and how I think differently now than I did a year ago. And then I look at my intentions for the year to see how I did. I want you to do it differently. I want you to do all of that in a different way than you have ever done it before. Because we understand, and I desire for you to understand that pattern being revealed in your own life. You know, here's what I was thinking this morning, just this morning, I was thinking that the story tells us in the gospel account of the birth of Jesus tells us that a baby was born in a humble beginning, and that we want to remember that though it was the beginning, it was not the end of the darkness. That the baby was born and that there were people in the world that were not happy about the birth of this child. There were leaders in the world that sought to kill the babies so that this prophesied one would not come to establish a new order. And so there, even though the star was there, I was thinking this morning that the trouble still lurked in the dark, and we still have darkness ahead of us. And that it's okay. We are well equipped to tap into that inner light, to recognize the wisdom patterns that we are created with, and that we are given everything we need to make our move on that cycle of the hero's journey as we do it individually and as we do it collectively as this great group of human beings on the planet at this time, even though we interpret the facts different from each other. I love that there are always cultural creatives on the planet. I love that there are always people who are willing to practice being open at the top, willing to follow that light, that inner guidance, willing to intuit the greater ideas of God itself. There are those of us who are willing to make space for the newness that is emerging on the planet. And so, as you do your own life review this, as a year is wrapping up, and you look at what's happened to you personally this year, I want you to do one thing. Don't look for what you've done. Don't measure what you have accomplished. Don't seek to see whether or not you have been effective. I'm inviting you to do one thing, and I think it's vitally important for all of us to think about this. One question to ask ourselves as we're wrapping up this idea of facts and faith. The question is, have you been faithful to your own values? Have you been faithful to the God-given gifts that are yours and only yours? Have you been faithful to the unchanging truth of who you are? And don't measure it by anybody else's idea. It's yours. Oh, and then I would just conclude by saying, and if you have misplaced your faith like your morning coffee, go looking for it. It'll be worth it. We'll reestablish it. So I would like to have a little transition here and see if we can anchor some of these ideas in the words of prayer. So just get comfortable where you're seated. Oh, and how wonderful it is to quench our thirst for life, our thirst for love, our desire to recognize that light of truth, the star of promise in the night sky. And so as we just turn within and recognize that activity of God within us, we find that pattern. It is a pattern of wisdom. It is the infinite intelligence of all the universe that has not only created us, but that sustains us, that breathes us, and that supplies us with all that we need in order to move through the rest of this year as we prepare ourselves to step into a brand new year. And so I acknowledge the patterns, the historical examples that have been given before us. I acknowledge in this moment the ancestors, those loved ones who have passed and now are gathering on the other side to support us as we move through the trials and the tribulations of living this life, the tail end of this virus, that we keep our interpretations in their light, in their love, in the way that there are angels everywhere. And how wonderful that Christmas is filled with that image of angels and of light and of eternal love. And so I know that where there are times where our faith bumps up against our fear, that they are not colliding. They are meeting together in this way that they become the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, which then turns in that motion, that natural movement of life, as we recognize the continuity of eternality. And so wherever there is any appearance of anything that ails our physical being, we respect ourselves and acknowledge the physicalness, the finiteness of the body, and yet at the same time we expand our minds and open to the light so that we recognize the instinctual, the healing nature of that divine DNA in our bodies. And so we are healed at the sounds of these words, at the very vibration of truth that speaks to the way we call forward and attract into our lives that healing, energetic movement of life. And we then move freely in our own pattern of wisdom, for we recognize that it cannot fail, that it will always bring us home again, back to truth, back to our grounding where everything is indeed balanced. And then it doesn't matter what lies in our future. We are equipped. We understand the metamorphosis as a natural part of our spiritual development and the way we will be revealing our wholeness even as we reveal it now. And so I'm so grateful for these words of wisdom and these great thinkers, the scriptural grounding that we have that shows us the nature of story and the way it works in our own life, and the power of interpreting in favor of life, in favor of God. And so I say yes to life. I say yes to God. And I move into that place of absolute gratitude for the miraculous way we can use our fingers. Thank you, Bridget. To handle a piece of paper and to do the work in this finite way we are called to do it, and rest in this truth of this vaster universe in which we can celebrate all of life. I honor those who have passed with reverence in my heart. I am grateful for this beautiful spiritual understanding and this spiritual community. And in this place of gratitude, I simply release the words of this prayer into that law, knowing indeed that it is already done. And together we say, and so it is. Amen. Amen.
Come take a chance, learn to dance, expand in cosmic resonance. Just trust your heart to find the beat. You cannot help but to move your feet. Don't be afraid to take the lead. It's easy to get up to speed. It's okay to stumble, it's okay to fall. The dance floor of life embraces it all. Love is the dance, and right in the wind. You know all the steps, so why not begin? inviting you into the sands. Life is your partner, you have been kissed. All apprehension is finally dismissed. Dance floor, your canvas and movements, your brush, masterpiece in the making. There's no need to rush. Once in a while, when a stranger cuts in, don't be afraid to go for a spin. Before you know it, you'll start to sway. The music of life won't get in your way. So let go of worry, release your fear. When students are ready, the teacher appears. Practice makes perfect, you know this is true. 'Cause the dance floor of life is you. Love is the dance, inviting you in. You know all the steps, so why not begin? Love is the dance, inviting you into the dance, to the dance.
Thank you, Craig. That was a beautiful song. So now is the time to recognize and celebrate the abundance of our life and of our community. So I just want to remind everybody that the abundance is not only money, the abundance is love, the abundance is health, the abundance is celebrating another holiday. So we are in this celebration mode right now with the holidays coming up upon us. So let's just stay in that place of abundance right here and right now. So let's say our giving affirmation together. I live in a consciousness of good. Divine love blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God, and so it is.
All right. Now see if I can remember. Yes. So, see if I can remember how, we're making it up. I'll just confess, we're just making it up. We're not really sure about this part yet. So we're going to stand, I'm going to say that with great authority, and we have a closing song, and if you've heard it before, you'll remember that it's really easy to pick up the chorus. You're not allowed to sing though, so don't really sing. Let's just see what happens here. And then I'll close, I'll have a little sort of benediction. It's Eddie Watkins.
Strong enough to bear the burdens that sometimes come, living this thing called life.
Yeah.
Am I wise enough to make the right decisions when I'm standing at the fork in the road?
It's this talk.
Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, rules and breathes and has his being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. Will I have enough to do the things I need to do to take care of myself?
Do you feel it?
Will I have the health of mind and body to live a life of grace and holiness. Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone and there's nothing I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place. I am the place where God. You are the place. Moves and breathes and has we are the place. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place.
Oh, and so I just know that we are the place where God shows up. And so let's do just a brief little closing affirmation. Repeat after me. Something wonderful is showing up in me right now.
Something wonderful is showing up in me right now.
It is this thing called life.
It is this thing called life.
Life is in my mind.
Life is in my mind.
Life is in my body.
Life is in my body.
And life is in all my experiences.
Life is in all my experiences.
I think it. I feel it. I know it. And I accept it. Just the way that it is. And just the way that it is becoming. Thank you, life. And so it is. Amen. Amen. Have a blessed day. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being here, everybody.